Hey, this is Toby. So in this video I want to talk about how you can use Visual Studio Code to edit your MQL5 files. I will talk about the advantages and disadvantages, and of course I will show you how you can set it up for yourself. Okay, let's go. Okay, so before we start with the setup, I want to show you some advantages and disadvantages I have found switching from the default meta editor to Visual Studio Code. I've used Visual Studio Code now for the past few weeks, and overall, I think it's just a better editor. So first of all, I want to do a quick comparison here. So this is the Visual Studio Code environment I'm using now to create my EAs and indicators for Metatrader 5. And here is the default meta editor. Of course, this is a personal choice you have to make, but I definitely prefer the Visual Studio Code editor. But of course, there are also some disadvantages with Visual Studio Code. So first of all, and I've made some notes here so I don't miss anything. So first of all, you don't have a debugger in Visual Studio Code for the MQL5 files. So if we look at the default meta editor, up here you find the options to debug your code, to find mistakes in your code. I don't use the debugger for my coding. I just use simple print statements to find mistakes. But if you don't want to miss this feature here, the debugger, you should probably stay with the default meta editor. And another disadvantage I have found with Visual Studio Code, or the extension I use, is that sometimes the autocomplete function does not recommend all the variables. So if I start typing input, now I can see all the input variables, starting with input and all the functions. So this is of course pretty handy while coding. But yeah, as I said, I only encountered this issue a few times. And also the extension I use is updated frequently. So I think this will be resolved in the future. And even right now, this is not a big deal for me. But if you are a complete beginner with MQL5, I would recommend that you start with the default editor, at least for a few weeks, and then you can make the switch to Visual Studio Code. Okay, but now I also want to talk about the advantages I found switching from the default editor to Visual Studio Code and the extension I use now. So first of all, and the most obvious one is of course the appearance here. So if we take a look at the default editor, yes, we have a dark mode. You can set custom colors, but you cannot save the color theme, and also the navigator and the toolbox is still with a white background. So this is just not up to date. I mean, it's 2023 and I don't know what Metaquotes is doing here. So if we take a look at Visual Studio Code, I can show you how easy it is to set a different color theme. You can also create your own color themes. So I have the dark Visual Studio Code color theme right now, but you can see you can choose a lot of different color themes here. And yeah, if you spend a lot of time in this environment, I think it's very important that you can set it or customize it how you like it. Okay. I will switch back to dark Visual Studio Code. And some other advantages are, for example, the minimap here on the right, which is pretty handy. You have code folding, so you can just fold parts of your code. Also, if you code in different languages, like Python, C++, now you have everything in one place. Also, go to definition of functions is pretty handy. This function or feature is also available in the meta editor, but for me this never worked. So if I right click, go to definition, go to declaration, or also for variables, this never works for me. I don't know, maybe it's just my instant of meta editor. Would be nice if it just tests this and let me know in the comments if this works for you. Okay, and also, yeah, if you work with different files, it's much easier to shift them around, make a split screen basically. Just how it should be, right? In meta editor, you can also do this, but then you have to click on window here. And then you have all the files. You have to minimize the ones you don't want and do this again. Then it's the wrong order. You have to click this, do it again. It's just a mess. That's just not up to date. Now, before we start with the setup, I want to talk about two more advantages. So first, in Visual Studio Code, everything you can see, you can basically customize it in the settings. And also, if you have a project and you want to compile it, you can just compile it from every file, at least with the extension I use in this video, and I will show you later how to do this. In Metaeditor, you have to switch back to the main file and compile from there, and that's just pretty annoying. Okay, so let's start with the setup, and I will show you how you can get Visual Studio Code to code your expert advisor and indicators. Okay, so this setup here works for me on a Windows machine at the current date. If something will change in the future, I will pin a comment, let you guys know, or if I miss something, I will also uninstall Visual Studio Code completely, so we can do it together step by step. Okay, so the first step is to download Visual Studio Code. It's free to use. The link is in the description. So just click here on this download button or here. If you use a Mac OS, there's also an option here. Okay, the next step is to install Visual Studio Code on your PC. So just run the file. Here you have to accept the agreement, read it, of course. I will just use the default directory. Next, 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 and install. Okay, now we can press finish here and Visual Studio Code should start. Okay, so the next step is to install a few extensions because in order for Visual Studio Code to recognize MQL5 language, we need a extension. So you can just click here on File, Preferences, Extensions, or you can also just click here on this icon on the left. Here we can see all the extensions we can install. Of course, we can also search. And the first extension I want to install is called MQL Tools. So just search for MQL, and there should be MQL Tools here. Of course, there are a few different extensions for the MQL5 language for Visual Studio Code, but I think this one here is at the moment the best one. It's up to date, and yeah, the developer is actively working on this extension to even improve it in the future. Okay, so let's install this extension. You can just click here on this install button, and yeah, it may take some time, but now we have installed this extension here. You can see all the features of this extension here, and all the way down there's also a quick setup guide, and we will just go through this step by step. It's very simple. Okay, so let's start with the first step here. We have to open the MQL5 folder from Visual Studio Code. So you can click here on this Explorer icon, top left corner, and here you can see open folder. Before we do this, we can go to our Metatrader platform, click here on File, Open Data folder, just to get the directory of our MQL5 folder. So double click here on MQL5, and let's copy this directory. It has to end with MQL5. This is really important. And let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Now you can click on Open Folder. Now you just have to navigate. I will just paste the directory. So now you can just click Select Folder. Okay, and now click here, Trust Files, and click on Yes. So now you can already see here on the left the MQL5 folder and all the files. Okay, so let's take a look at the next step. I will open up the extensions again, click on MQL Tools here. So the first step is already done. And now for the next step, we need to specify the directory to our Metaeditor file. Let's open up the settings. So you can click here on this icon and click on Extension Settings. And here are all the settings for this MQL Tools extension. And all the way down, you will find a setting called Metaeditor 5 directory. And here we need to specify the directory of the Metaeditor file. So to get this directory, you have to browse to your Metatrader 5 folder. For me, this is here under C, Program Files, Darwin-X Metatrader 5. And here we can see the Metaeditor 64 file. And this is what we need. So I click here Shift, I hold Shift, right click, and I just select here copy as path. And now I have the directory, and I will paste it here. So it's just C, Program Files, Darwin-X, Metatrader 5, Metaeditor 64. Okay. the settings are saved automatically. So we can close them now and take a look at the next step. Okay, so for the next step here, you have to create the settings file. Most of the time this is done automatically. So if we take a look here at the Explorer, we can see under our mql5 folder, we already have our .vscode folder and our settings.json. So if it's not there for you, you can press Ctrl, Shift, and P and just type MQL and select here Create Configuration. And then the folder should appear here. Okay, and that's basically all you need to do in order to be able to compile MQL files here in Visual Studio Code. Now, before we do the next and last step here, I want to test if we can actually compile. So I open up the Explorer here. I open up a very simple EA, maybe one we did here on the channel, first EA. And I will also open up the terminal window. So I click here on View, Terminal, and now we can compile. So here on the top right corner, you can check the syntax, compile or compile with a script. So I will just click here on compile MQL file, and you can see here all the warning and error messages. And in this case, we compiled successfully. You can also just press Ctrl, Shift, and X to compile the file. Okay, so let's go back to the extension here and let's take a look at the last step here. Okay, here with this last step, you can add icons to your Explorer because right now it looks pretty boring. And all the files look the same. So you can just press Ctrl, Shift, and P and type MQL, click on Add Icons to the theme and select one of the 4 options. So I will select Visual Studio Code icons here. Now in the bottom right corner, you can see a install button. Let me just disable my webcam. So here you can click on install. And now let's just wait for the extension. And now you should be able to see the extension here. If you click on extensions, Visual Studio Code icons. And if we open up the Explorer now, we can see all the folders have different icons, and yeah, it just looks better, I think. Okay, and a few more things I want to show you. So if we go to the extension MQL Tools again, to the settings, I disabled here this arrow and warning highlighting in the editor. I think that's pretty annoying. And also if you want to install another color theme, you can always search here in the extensions. And for example, you can install the Rain Glow color theme package here. Click on install. And now you can see you have a lot of different options. And if you want to switch a color theme, you can just press Ctrl K and Ctrl T, and then you can select a theme you like. Okay. And another cool thing here in Visual Studio Code, you can compile a project from every file. You just have to add a comment here at the very top of each file. So in Metatrader, you have to go back to the main file, compile from there. But if we add here, and you can do this by right click on the main file, insert file name in document. You can see the comment here. And now we are able to just compile from every include file, the whole project. So that's also pretty cool. So I think that's all for this tutorial. If this was helpful for you, it would be nice if you leave a like, write a comment what I should do next here on the channel. And yeah, I will see you in one of the next videos. Bye bye.